Okay, this is Moshe coming to you from Israel in the Galilee. Today's the 12th of May. It's about 8:15 in the morning here in Israel. What we're going to cover today is the worsening or the expanding of the war between India and Pakistan. That ceasefire lasted 4 hours. It was nonsense. Trump got egg on his face there. And I'll give you some idea what's going on and where I think it's headed. And then we're going to discuss, is this going to be where all the big wars start? Well, Ukraine and Russia has been going for 3 years and it wasn't it. And, the wars between the nations are going to happen and it's a possibility. We'll discuss why it's a very good, probable way for it to start. We're going to look at the time frame and what other nations will get involved, and it's going to be, easy to understand. And then we're going to talk about where we are in Bible prophecy now. And I'm going to talk about some of the so-called extra-biblical books of the Bible, but not for any great deal of time. And what is the Church of the Antichrist? Although there's no scripture that says the Church of the Antichrist, we'll discuss the concept of that. And I'm going to go look at the live stream. I'm not going to put my posts up in the live stream. I'm going to streamline things. And offering information is in the description box towards the end of it. And my email address is at the very bottom of the description box. It's israelgiving7@gmail.com. I also want to tell you, and I might remind you this later on, that I think the Lord has been showing me to get these broadcasts up earlier. While I've moved them up in time, I think he's telling me to move it up about another 2 hours earlier. So I've been getting up at rather early in the morning, having had enough sleep. And then I don't want to get on too early, so I'm knocking myself out, sort of doing thorough research as to what I'm going to say. And I think that it will reach a larger audience, and that's what I think I'm supposed to be doing, and that's why I've been waking up so early and not understanding what's going on, why. But I believe that's going to reach other people. At least 50%, if not 60 or so, or 65 even, or more, of the people that listen to me are from America and Canada, North America, if you will. I get next to no Spanish speakers. So from Mexico to Argentina, I get very, very few people. I do have people in Europe, but it's not overwhelming. And I have very few or none from Asia. And the Middle East I don't see them. So with English, you're going to reach, America and Canada and parts of Europe, and pretty much that's it. Okay. All right. So let me make sure we have a live stream. With English, you're going to reach, America and Canada. We got a live stream. People are coming in. I've got moderators. Thank you, moderators. Caucasus Mountains in Russia. That's nice. I'm going to start, like I said, moving the broadcasts up perhaps 2 hours earlier than what I did today. So it'll be, if I start at, let's say, my time, 6 or 6:30 in the morning. Right now it's about 8:20. I'm probably going to reach a lot more people because it's going to be like 10 o'clock or 10:30 in America on the East Coast anyway. But that's what I think I'm going to do. That's the way it looks today. Um, that's probably going to work out better, so I'll be reaching more people as a live stream. A lot of people go on YouTube and they say, "Oh, what's on live?" And they look around. Oh, let me go here. That kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to do some praise and then we'll go. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay, so India and Pakistan are heating it up. There's what they're calling, probably correctly, a weapons or munitions depository of some sort that India hit. They're labeling it a nuclear facility. And they did cause some damage. Apparently, Pakistan has never saw fit to fortify themselves under the ground, like Yemen and Iran, for instance. So India was able to hit it. India is threatening Pakistan and so forth. Now, some of the dams were opened up yesterday. This was not due to Modi saying, "Oh, I want to be nice to Pakistan and give them the water back." It was due to flooding, and they had to do it. But they have every intention of continuing to restrict the water flow as best they can to Pakistan, which is damaging Pakistan. They use this for artificial irrigation and agriculture, drinking, bathing. It's used in industry, restaurants, and so forth. They can't survive without their water any more than you could wherever you happen to be, okay? They don't have, 30 or 50 huge water desalination plants around the country to make water, so there you have it. They're up the creek without a paddle. India is rather proud that one of the jets that Pakistan got from them, an advanced jet, took down the French, well, I call it the Raphael fighter. They pronounce it a different way, Raphael, so I don't know. I'll call it the Raphael fighter jet. They're quite happy about that. So they could be testing weapons using a proxy called Pakistan to do it. China has a border with Pakistan, so getting weapons into Pakistan discreetly is a child's play. You put it in a covered truck, you drive it in. That's it. What's to talk about? They could fly it in, whatever they want to do. They're gonna get it in. It's easy for that. China does not get along with India, and it's both ways. And they are rather adamant, I would say, that they're not going to let India conquer Pakistan, and thus India has an even larger border with China, because India and Pakistan both border China. So China is not about to let that happen, believe me, okay? Now it's going to start with weapons, missiles, drones, maybe radar, anti-missile systems, and then it's going to gravitate to gathering intelligence for Pakistan, which it probably already is doing. I'm rather certain they're doing at least some of that. And it's going to be military advisors, which probably already is taking place. and then it could likely escalate into more things. But, India telling China, well, if you put 48,000 troops in Pakistan, you're crossing a red line. That's not going to happen. China's not going to pay attention to any red lines of India. In 2020, they conquered a piece of land in India and built a military base on it inside India at the Himalaya Mountains. It's 14,000 feet up. Must be rough on the troops to, live there, but that's what they did. And India just let it go, which could work with a non-Muslim country like China. So it never escalated, but now it's escalating. If China gets into the fight, who else comes with China? North Korea. Treaties with China, mutual defense. Right? Who else? Iran. Same thing. Who else? Russia. Same thing. Will America help India? Yes, but I do not know for sure if Trump would ever send troops or even ever send warships to help India. Would Trump fly cargo planes of weapons into India? I think without a doubt he'll do that. So, and Israel sells them drones. Israel will push more weapons into India. Would Israel ever take troops and send them to India to help them fight Pakistan? Nah. Not even 1 in 100 chance. That ain't going to happen. Weapons, if Israel can spare them, yeah, that'll happen. We're approaching halfway into 2025, and I have not heard nor seen of the Iron Beam being used yet in Israel, yet they told us it would be in 2025, so I don't know what's up with that. Iron Beam is a laser weapon that takes down missiles, and they tested it as prototype, and it worked, and they went into what I would assume is rapid production, yet I have not heard nor seen of a single one of them being deployed actively in Israel. Yemen is continuing to launch missiles at us. They're having celebratory, I don't know what the word is, celebration rallies in the cities in Yemen, and they're chanting, we beat the Americans off or got rid of the Americans, something to that effect, and now we'll get the Jews. Okay? So they're in a frenzy. They're being propagandized that they beat America, and to an extent they did. Trump couldn't handle it. He wasn't effective against the Houthis. And they were using B-2 bombers, and I think he just threw the towel in and said enough. He lost 2 or 3 F-18 planes. It kind of, I know it was at least 2. Some are saying 3. I think it was 2. And the warships are in jeopardy from their missiles and stuff like that. Now, if Trump is dumb enough to move American warships within range of Yemen, they may very likely just fire at the American warships, thinking, what a great victory. We'll get a hit on the warships, and, the people will rally to our cause. Now I'm going to start telling you a lot of news you may not be aware of regarding Iran and Yemen. I get a lot of news in Israel that comes on the social media that's derived from Arabic sources, perhaps Farsi sources, although those are pretty lousy to get anything out of, and Hebrew sources, and of course English as well. Okay. Now, Israel gave an official announcement to the country of Yemen that they should evacuate 3 additional ports in Yemen that the Houthis use to conduct, oil sales, commerce, containers, food, whatever. In addition to the one that was destroyed, the big port. And this leaves the Iranians less of an avenue to move more weapons into Yemen. And the same would apply to China, Russia, or whoever else may be giving them weapons. The same thing. The big airport at the capital, Sana'a, was devastated. Now, what they are doing with this devastated airport is they're filling the holes on the runway, okay? And they're going to lay blacktop or concrete over it. And they're going to open it up, but it's not going to be, I don't know how successful it is. I don't think they've restored their radar and their control tower at all, and that's a big job. The thought that was appearing in social media was that they're doing this so Yemeni citizens around the world can fly home, and they're going to enable real immature, like an airport of 1938 or something, where they're going to have radio communication with the ground, and that's about it. So they're going to probably just land, and then they'll have one of those staircases and deplane the people and put the baggage on the side of the runway, and that's it. Now, it also could be they're doing it so they could receive weapons from China and Iran, who may try landing under those conditions, but I don't know if they would. I'm not sure. If it looks like there's going to be weapons transfers, then Israel will just go back and bomb it again. That's real simple. Only this time we'll probably drop, 40 or 50 bombs all over that airport thing. Make it really, it's busted up. I mean, they don't have anything to go with. All they're going to do is try to restore a runway. Now, will passenger jets from other countries take a chance and just try to land in 1930s airport conditions? I don't know. Do you know that if you go back even into the 40s and 50s, maybe even the early 60s, there was around the world, including America, but not limited to America, they had a lot of planes that was big, not that big. They probably carried maybe up to 100 people, probably 60 or 50. They were seaplanes, okay? And they would land on the water. And then after they finished their landing, they would circle back and pull up to a pier that was out in the water. Not that far out in the water, maybe 60 or 100 yards or something like that, And they would pull up because they don't need a lot of deep water for a pontoon seaplane. And these were not anywhere near the size of a 737 or anything like that. I think they were maybe 40, 50, 60 people. 60 would be on the high side. They had sleeping cubicles in these things. I think just the people that would pay more money would get one. It wasn't much. I mean, it wasn't like a little room. It was, usually I think they had 2 of them, one upper and one lower. And it was basically a small cot, mounted on a platform in there. And it had a little light in there, maybe had a little fan or something. And they would go in there, and it had a curtain, and they would change or whatever. And then they would lay down in the bed, and the blanket and the pillow, and go to sleep, where the other people would be stuck reclining their chair and sleeping in the chair that didn't want to spend the extra money. Now, these planes were reassuring to people because they typically flew them across oceans in large bodies of water. So the people would, if the plane failed, they normally had four propellers. Pan Am made them. They called them a clipper ship, I believe. They had four propellers, and they were very luxurious. The seats were nothing like the garbage they have to sit on today. They were very first class. They had the champagne. They had the very good food they prepared on the plane. Back then, stewardesses were nurses. They had RNs as stewardesses, and there was smoking in the cabin, cigars, pipes. You can only imagine what that was like, right? And when I first started flying for many years, they had smoking in the plane, all over the plane. And when you got off, you smelled like cigarettes, Then they restricted it, I think, back in the 90s, where they had about 5 or 6 rows in the back where you could smoke. So if you were seated within 3 or 4 rows of the smoking section, you would get off the plane smelling like cigarettes. And then they stopped smoking altogether, I guess 15, 20 years ago. But back in those days, people were expected to smoke on the plane. And those were the days when America, 50% of the population in America was smokers. The cigarette companies had, anyway, I don't want to get off on this. So if the plane had to go down over the water, they had radios. They usually had 2 or 3 different radios in the plane. And they would have, the crew was different then. They had a pilot, a co-pilot, they had a navigator, and they had a radio operator. They didn't have much going on with radar. And they didn't fly at such high altitude. So if the plane had to go down and do a crash landing, it would just land on the water with the pontoons. The plane would float. They would be on the radio telling everybody where their last known position is, and they had compasses and sextants, and they could figure out where they were, and then help would come. And people like that. Today, people are used, if the plane gets in trouble over the ocean and you got to go down, you got a few minutes before the plane sinks. So they have these inflatable slides. You slide down, they got lifeboats, and it's a rugged experience. Now, if there was 20-foot waves, which is not so extraordinary in the oceans, I don't know how these pontoon planes would have done. Probably made it. It just would have been rough. If there was 40-foot waves, I think it would have, I don't know. I don't think they would have made it. But anyway, people liked the assurance of that. So these were used not overland. So if you were going from Chicago to Dallas, you wouldn't be on one of those planes, because there was plenty of airports you could emergency land in and stuff like that. So I thought that might find that interesting. Anyway, they used to land without the radar and stuff like that, but they did have a control tower, and they had binoculars, and they'd look at the planes, and they would tell the plane, to circle at this altitude and wait, and then they would bring them into a certain runway. So they could still do that at the busted up airport. They could have radio communications easy, and they could have binoculars, and they could, they might just tell the planes to come in spaced, 30 or minutes or an hour apart, so they don't have any, congestion and potential accidents above. I don't know if the airlines will cooperate, honestly. If Yemen has military passenger planes, which they probably have a few, they could fly them to certain airports and so the people fly to, I don't know, pick a country, any country, I don't know, Armenia or you name it, and they fly to some country and they land there, and then the Yemen military has a passenger plane and takes them back to Yemen. It's probably how it'll work, but because I don't believe any airlines are going to take a chance like that. I don't think their insurance would let them. So anyway, so Israel made a release that we're going to be attacked. What they said was, for your own safety, you should evacuate these 3 ports, the remaining 3 ports in Yemen. Evacuate them until further notice. Okay? Now, further notice could be a day, a week, a month. So what that does is it's going to make the people that work at the port not be very interested in reporting for work because they've been warned. And Israel has a habit of fulfilling these warnings. We use this approach in Gaza heavily. Okay, so is this psychological warfare, and we don't intend to go through that? I would give that a very low probability. I really would. I believe we intend to go through them. So during the night, the Yemen media and I think various other Muslim media were out there saying there was all kinds of explosions and attacks taking place in Yemen. Why they said this, I don't know. People have not been able to find any evidence of such attacks, and Israel said we didn't do anything. I don't think anybody did. I think they made it up. Why they would make this up is not, there's no great reason for that. Because the people in Yemen could, visualize the port and say, gee, there's nothing here. They know they're being lied to, so I don't understand their logic. So more is going to hit Yemen. Now in Iran, they're still getting explosions and fires. Several people's houses have been destroyed in Yemen. Now, in Iran. And there's one school of thought, which maybe is real. There's been a lot of blackouts in Tehran and other places in Iran, power failures in recent days, including yesterday, from what I could tell. And the story is that their appliances are catching fire from the surges of the electricity. Probably before it goes out, the power surges, and it could be true. I imagine they're not using good appliances from Germany or America or even the UK. They're probably using appliances made in, Yemen or garbage from China, cheap junk. I don't know. They probably don't have high quality standards for electrical appliances in Yemen that have to be tested to show themselves safe to get a approval. It probably doesn't exist in Yemen. So now we go, so Iran is still having explosions and fires and power outages and all kinds of problems. The IRGC is very scared right now. Iran, day after day after day, is keeping their missiles, their anti-aircraft missile systems on alert. They're stressed out, and there's a lot of protests against the Khomeini government, and they're putting posters up against it. So the people in Iran that are not dedicated terrorist Muslim oriented are freaking out, and they don't want Iran doing what Iran is doing, okay? But it would be very hard for them to rise up against this regime, and while this may happen, them taking over the regime and establishing a sensible country is not prophecy. That won't happen. When you add up the Iranian military and their militia and police, you get into the multiples of millions, someplace between 3 and 5 million. The country has a total of 91 million, and there's not that many civilians that are going to rise up that can hold up against the forces of the Iranian government. The young teenage boys that are getting drafted into Iran's military don't like it, don't want to go, but there's not much they could do about it. So maybe the IRGC and other crack units are really gung-ho pro-Khomeini, let's get killed and get our virgins. A lot of their army doesn't have this orientation at all, and it doesn't want to get killed and doesn't want to fight for Iran. So their military is not that up to snuff, but the people operating their missile systems and their radars, and they're probably up to the standards of Khomeini, which is lunatic murderer, Now comes the peace talks, which happened yesterday between Iran and the United States. Now, what you need to gather or take away from these peace talks is this. Trump is sitting there belly aching, and Rubio and Hegseth and all of them, we're not going to accept anything other than the dismantling of the nuclear facilities, period. Okay? And we want to witness this dismantling. And if they don't do it nicely, we're going to do it by force. That's what we hear from America. And what we hear from Iran is nobody can tell us if we can have nuclear or not to have nuclear, or what level of uranium we want to produce. And no, you can't tell us anything. We're not interested. Our ballistic missile program is off the table. Okay. So both sides are flapping their jaws with heavy words. Okay, yet they're still meeting 4 times already to discuss the ceasefire. So obviously both sides are lying. Yes, Trump's apparently lying. And Iran is apparently lying. And we don't know what they're really talking about, but why they would meet 4 times to discuss matters that are not negotiable according to both sides is obviously they're lying to us. They're both trying to posture themselves as being tough, okay? And I, at this point, don't buy it. I think Trump realizes that he's got a problem with Iran. And he's not going to destroy their missile cities. He's not going to destroy the nuclear facilities because he can't. He doesn't have the bombs and the equipment that'll work. And he doesn't want to see the damage on the American military bases in the region and the oil refineries and the ports and the piers, cutting down very low well, this would cut down the ability for these countries to sell oil to the world, causing a severe spike in oil prices, which some people say could be $200 up to $500. The lowest a barrel, the lowest I hear anybody talk about that has some brains was this Gerald Celente guy, but he doesn't believe in the Bible at all. And he says that prices could go to 120. Well, how high they go is going to depend on the fear level in the world and how many oil refineries and ports and piers were damaged, and what production level where the damages, how many barrels would not be coming forth. Right now, a lot of these oil countries in the Middle East are reducing prices down into the 60s per barrel and increasing production. So Trump is apparently trying to manipulate the prices of oil for some reason. Unclear exactly what his reasons are. I mean, I could speculate, but it seems a little bit weird. Let me look at the live stream and see if we got questions. You can put questions. Oh, Curacao. Okay. Yep, Curaçao's a beautiful place. Australia, okay. Canada. All right. Trump was negotiating directly with Hamas and worked a deal where they're going to release a single hostage with no prisoner exchange from the Israeli jails. A dual national American-Israeli guy is going to get released tomorrow. And that's a goodwill gesture to telling us that's preceding Trump's visit to the Middle East this week, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Okay, so why is Trump, I'll be right back, and we'll talk about why is Trump making things look like he's separating from Israel, because I'm not so sure he is. somebody is attacking Iran, causing the fires, explosions, stuff like that. Okay? It's probably not America. It's probably Israel. So Trump is using Israel as a proxy. But he wants to make it look like he's distancing himself from Israel. Okay? And Trump, on the other hand, is also trying to cut deals with like Saudi Arabia to stop them from selling oil not on the US dollar and pull them into the fold. So he's not coming to Israel on his tour of the Middle East, but the real reason he's not coming to Israel is it's probably not safe. Okay? What if Iran launches, 600 missiles and China and Russia help guide the missiles and they start blowing up Israel? And how do they get Trump out of there? You see? It's not just that. Hegseth canceled his trip to Israel, but now Witkoff is coming, I think today or tomorrow, to be here for the PR on the release of the American-Israeli hostage. It's a good thing. I mean, okay, but what happened to Americans' policy that we don't negotiate with terrorists? Well, Trump negotiates with terrorists. You know what that means? That means if they cause trouble with the American bases in the Middle East, they're going to try their hardest to overrun the bases and take hostages, American soldiers and civilians. They will rape the women. They will rape the men too. They did that when they invaded us on October 7th. They will do that. And they will take these hostages and run them into different countries and put them in people's houses like they did in Gaza. And you're going to have a heck of a time finding them. And then they're going to blackmail Trump. I don't think Trump's ready for this. I don't think Trump would know what to do one way or the other. The only president that I could remember in America that would really know what to do was Eisenhower. Because of his military experience, he'd know what he's up against. Trump won't understand it. He'll try to make a deal and negotiate, but the deal they're going to want is going to be outrageously expensive. Not economically, but they might want hundreds or thousands of terrorists released from American prisons. It's really hard to say what all these nutbags would ask for, but rest assured it would be an expensive trade. You can't take them as hostages because they'll just say, well, the hostages are martyrs, they'll go to heaven. They won't pay attention to it. They won't care. It won't mean anything to them. Go ahead, take hostages. They're martyrs. They don't care. Now, the leaders are not Muslims. They say they are. They're Satan bots. Now, if you took their families hostage, that would get a reaction from them. Especially if you kept it quiet. So they wouldn't lose face. You put them on phone calls, video calls with their family. And you tell them, we're going to kill them. Okay? You got 24 hours, or they might say 6 hours or 3 hours or whatever to give us the hostages back, and then you get your family back. Now, the leaders know there ain't no such thing as going up there and getting the 70 virgins, so they're going to get real scared. Now, Golda Meir did this when the terrorists were holding people hostage and stuff like that. She had Mossad teams surveillance the families of these big terrorist leaders, and they grabbed them, took them to a secure location, put them on the phone. They didn't have video calls back then. Put them on the phone with the hostages and said, now we got your family, kids, wives, parents, brothers, sisters, whatever they could get. That worked. They understand that, the leaders though, but you got to get the top dogs, and a lot of them have their families, secured in where they are, so it's not easy. Trump and Iran both don't want to see a war. And they're obviously in the process of making some sort of a deal. And it may be like India and Pakistan. They reach a deal and then it blows up. And then the situation is worse. Or they never reach a deal. Trump sees Iran as a threat through BRICS to destroy the US dollar using the oil. And that's why he's trying to bust them out economically. Destroying their port was a very good move because it cuts down 80% of their oil flow. To really enhance this, they got to get all the other ports and they got to start destroying airports. Then oil refineries as well. But when you start doing that, Iran is liable to launch at the military bases of America in the region and the oil refineries of the other countries. Iran didn't do that this time over the port because the situation in Iran is so destabilized with people wanting to get rid of Khomeini and his government that they're afraid to say, oh, we're retaliating for the destruction of the port. They're so scared. They want to make the people think it was some sort of accidental fire or whatever they're trying to do. So Israel is striking Iran with regularity, just quietly. And to avoid, or what Trump's trying to do to avoid his bases getting attacked and him getting the blame, is he's trying to make it look like he's distancing himself from Netanyahu, but not in any meaningful way. Not coming to Israel for this tour of the Middle East countries is, number one, it's a threat to his life to be in Israel, okay? Number two, it makes his relations with the UAE and Qatar and Saudi Arabia easier. Now, this is, I think, scandalous. Qatar is giving Trump a $400 million aircraft. That's a 747 modified to be a flying yacht. Okay? So this is going to be ostentatious. It's going to have, gold faucets and handles with the sinks, the finest leather money could buy on the seats, and fantastic carpeting and all kinds of stuff like that. Fantastic entertainment systems, a great kitchen, probably have a shower or a bedroom, all the stuff that some billionaire sheik would want. And Trump says they're going to use it, and after he leaves office, it's going to go to the Trump library. Okay. Qatar is an enemy of Israel, although a quiet enemy. And they're bribing Trump, obviously. And they want a Palestinian state. Is Trump going to come out and say he's supporting a Palestinian state? The White House yesterday officially made an announcement that that was a lie. He has no intention of doing that. Saudi Arabia keeps insisting on a Palestinian state to normalize relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia is a good-for-nothing country. They're lousy to everybody in the world except themselves. It's a horrible place. It's a dictatorship passed down through the family, like Jordan, like Kuwait, like Qatar, like Bahrain, like UAE, like Oman. All garbage. People have no rights. If they want to torture somebody, they do it. If they want to disappear somebody, they do it. If you live there, you're born there, and you mind your own business, and you put up with whatever they do, and you go to work, and you just don't ever get political, and they don't care. They're fine with you. So America, the so-called democratic country, has aligned themselves with all these dictators and support these dictators that don't do anything about human rights and stuff like that. That enforce Sharia law and make the women live under Sharia law, which is sex discrimination. They have next to no rights. Their testimony in court is worth half of what a man's testimony is. They got to walk around with a burqa on in 120-degree heat. They don't say anything. They take gay people and throw them off a roof head down. They don't say anything. Lots of foreign workers go there and get maltreated. They don't say anything. No free elections. They don't say anything. Forced religion. They don't say anything. The reason they don't say anything in America is these leaders want a country like that. They want to become the royals in the country, okay? And they want to be immune from taxes, from civil lawsuits, from criminal actions. They want to be immune. They want to be royals. That's what they want. That's why so many presidents run over to England and get knighted after they leave office. They want to set up a kingdom under a king. And they'll only have one king, but they'll have other titles, dukes, duchesses, and have varying degrees of power. And of course, that'll only be for the Satan bots. Nobody else is going to get in. It's not going to happen. There's no time for that. But that's their intentions, obviously. Did Trump ever audit the Fort Knox gold? Nope. Are there any signs that he will? Nope. Did he ever tell the people why? Nope. In his first term, he said he would get rid of Obamacare. He never did it. Is he doing it in his second term? No. It's a horrible system, but he won't get rid of it. Trump's not like all the rest of them, but in a lot of ways he is. Remember when he was running for his first time, he was saying, let's lock up Hillary, let's put Hillary in the jail. And then there was a video of him where he didn't know he was on video, and it was a private party or something, after he won the election or something like that. And they said, what about locking up Hillary? And he said, no, that was just for the election. He was lying to the people. At Hillary's expense, but he didn't care. So Trump's making a lot of promises again, and they're just going away. Just going away. So what's Trump going to do with Iran? Well, there's going to be a war against Iran. I don't know who's going to destroy it, because it says destroyed by our enemies in Jeremiah 49. Somebody's going to do it. And it's plural, so it's not just one country like just Israel. So it's going to happen. And maybe not Trump. All right. Let's see what else we got here to cover. Pakistan-Indian war is very hot. They're using missiles, planes, drones, all kinds of stuff. It's going. And India is not saying they're turning the water on for Pakistan. They haven't gotten rid of all the water yet, but they're saying they intend to. And Pakistan is, of course, can't continue without their water. They can't make it. They need water. Okay, like any other country. So the escalation of the war there is not yet in its fullest, but it's going to get there. So America did negotiate directly with Hamas over this hostage release. And what Hamas is trying to do is release some hostages and get humanitarian aid turned back on again for them. And we'll see how that goes. You know, Israel's position is real simple. If you don't want to return the hostages, don't ask us for humanitarian aid. How stupid do you think we are? Yet, Trump seems to be honoring that. Stupid. There's a video that I saw that showed Macron of France and Merz from Germany sitting at a table, and the camera went on, and there's a plastic bag of cocaine there, so people say. And Macron calmly picks it up and puts it away where you can't see it, and Merz takes away a dosing device that you could use to some kind of a spoon Mertz has to administer the cocaine up the nose or something. And, you know, that's just to show you that these people that run these countries are freaks. Some of you know what I mean. And they're derelicts, and that's who Satan has. So let's talk about spiritual warfare kind of things. When, you know, you get into different translations, let me tell you how I judge things, okay? The most recent translation I consider worth picking up is the King James back around 1888 or whatever it is, 78, 88, around there. Anything that comes newer after that is more garbagey, worse than the King James. The King James is twisted inside and out. Many, many, many places the meanings of the words are deceived. They deceive you with it, okay? The more modern translations are much worse, okay? See, back, if you're going back to 1888 or something, how many people went to college? Barely any. Okay? Not many. And how many people would really finish high school? Not many. How many people didn't read or write? Tons of people wouldn't read or write, or just very simplistically. Okay. So the seminary people, you see, they were writing scholarly books, okay? More so in the 1700s, early 1800s. And the audience for these books was other seminary people, churchianity. And let me explain. People didn't have the literacy to understand it. The church people that were true believers, if there were any, didn't have any literacy at a level high enough to understand these things. They couldn't understand how to work from Greek to English or Hebrew to English. Strong's was written someplace around the King James Bible times, I believe. They didn't know what a Strong's was. They couldn't afford books. They couldn't afford to go to school. They had jobs. They had to work. They didn't, they couldn't study it the way we can today. The best they could do was be to pick up alternate translations. So you had Wycliffe and Tyndale and, Bishop's Bible, this Bible, that, all churchianity cooking the book, twisting it. So the church world didn't care what translation you went after. You weren't going to get the insight. You couldn't go into the original languages. I have never seen any work from churchianity, even back to 16 and 1700s, that was very truthful or revealing, because they didn't know. But they were very much less careful about revealing things in the scriptures because they were mostly talking to each other or preaching to each other, the various pastors, church figures, and stuff like that. Okay? But they were still into disguising things and hiding things. So the older works are better. Okay? If you want to pursue the apocryphal books or the pseudepigrapha books, there's an author named R.H. Charles. There's another character that's called Charles Worth or Charles Worthy or something like that, that wrote a pseudepigrapha in the, 1980s or 90s or something like that. That's a piece of garbage. Don't waste your time with that. The one going back that was published by Oxford, R.H. Charles, in 1917, is a pretty good work, and it examines the language of these pseudepigrapha and apocryphal books. And you can download some of these books from Amazon, in the form of a Kindle for free. I saw some for free. Some are going for 50 cents, $1, very cheap. The other way you could access some of these books is go to archive.org, 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 and search for these things. You could try, I think his name is, R.H. Charles, and look for these books. And sometimes you could download them, sometimes you could just read them online, but you could always read them online. And you could see what's there, okay? I think in the Pseudepigrapha by R.H. Charles lies the Book of Enoch, and others. And the stuff is free or close to free, so you could get it and you could read it. Now, why am I looking harder at these? Because I haven't really paid attention to them for 10 years or so, or even, I guess 10 or 12 years. I got the Pseudepigrapha books the first time in latter 1990s. And I devoured them. I read them a lot. And I never really was teaching out of them because people reject them. And why do the people reject them? Because the churches reject them. Now, we shouldn't pay attention to what the churches reject because they're the makers of error. That's the church of the Antichrist because they teach against the Bible. And the Word made flesh is Yeshua. They're against Christ. They're against Yeshua. They're against the Word. Okay? So them rejecting it is a good sign, but you have to look at why they reject it. A lot of times historically inaccurate. And I've talked to you about some of that. It's usually nonsense. They get rid of them. Now the Bible itself tells us there's many books mentioned in our Bible that we don't have. Okay? And any churchianity schmuck Satanist could go out and concoct a book and say, this is this book or this is that, like Jubilees is basically an extended Genesis. I've read that several times. I don't think it's that bad. But the apocalypse of Peter and the apocalypse of Elijah are what they both say, that Enoch and Elijah will come down to earth. And they're out. The things that I find Satan wants to cover up avidly is any information about the two witnesses that'll make you understand what's going on and the glory of God of Israel. He doesn't want you to know any of that. Who threw him out of heaven? The glory of God of Israel. Michael threw him out of heaven. That explains that. See, so the reason they're rejecting these books is really selfish reasons for their own preservation. The churches were started by the Catholics. The Catholics were running around preaching in Latin. Now, we know the Bible was never written in Latin. They call it the Vulgate, Vulgate. And they did that because the people didn't speak Latin anymore, and they wouldn't understand it. So they'd be saying Dominus, Schmaminus, Barbarus, They were using Latin. They walk around with their incense, Santu, 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 all this garbage, So the churches were persecuting people that wouldn't join the church with torture, murder, penalties of all kinds, and, they were garbage, from the word go, and they were losing it. people started getting translations, apparently. So they started issuing Bibles. They did it. The Catholics did it. Wycliffe was one of the big ones in the 1300s. The Wycliffe Bible, I've read it in its original language, in original English, and you can compare it to a King James. It's very identical, except the words are in Old English. It's garbage. It's twisted and turned like crazy. It doesn't say in Daniel 9:24, 70. It says 70 weeks. Then you get the Bishop's Bible, the Tyndale Bible, the this Bible, the that Bible. They were all these people that made these Bibles were not translating them out of the Greek and the Hebrew, as far as I could tell. Definitely not the Hebrew. They were just all rewriting what the other guys originally wrote. That's it. That's all they did. Garbage work upon garbage work. They were all no good. I scoured over them for years. I was in Florida. I went to the university library and I found good works, well, good old works, and I read them. I went to the state library. I found some, not much. Then I started buying stuff online from book dealers, that had these old works and stuff like that, When you go to Kyle and Delitzsch, Keil and Delitzsch, Del, it starts with, they did a rather nice, not very accurate in all cases, but rather nice translation of the Old Testament, but with errors, with intentional errors, I would say, because they knew too much about Hebrew to make these errors unintentionally. They were intentional. They're part of the church world. The church people, the publishers published their works. It came out in 10 volumes. I have them here someplace. I have, I think, 2 sets of them. And you can get it in e-sword.net for free online. And I use it at times. Don't use it as a commentary because they don't know nothing, okay? I just use it sometimes as a language reference, but they twist and turn the scriptures abundantly in their translations. They went from Hebrew to German to English. Or they went to German and then somebody put it into English, I probably should say. But I think they originally did it in German. And then, so maybe in the German work, this is very possible. It was an honest work and the people that put it into English perverted it. But chances are it was perverted. If the church publishers start publishing books to sell them that the church is going to reject, they're going to go bankrupt and go out of business. So they make sure they publish works that are consistent with what the church will allow them to publish. And that's the long and the short and the tall of it. Okay. The one translation that I found where this woman self-published and interpreted Daniel 9:24 correctly is 70, 270. She self-published it. No publishing house in the church world handled it. She went to some secular publisher and published several hundred copies of it or something like that. And she had a lot of other doctrinal errors. I don't think she was that swift at translation. You can't translate correctly unless you know prophecy. That's it, because you're going to go off course. Now, the 2,000 years of Hosea 6:1 and 2, okay, God's not helping the people understand the gospel. These are the times of punishment. Yeshua said, now it's the daytime you can work. Soon the night comes and no man works. Well, during the nighttime when no man works is when the churches of the Antichrist popped up, and they're still thriving today. Because the 2,000 years is not yet over. It's in the closing stages, the year of recompenses. It's well progressed, but it's not finished yet. it finishes with the appearing of Yeshua in the clouds, and then they get everlasting life. That's the end of the age, and now we're in the new age with everlasting life. We're not there yet, but we could be days away, weeks, maybe not years or anything like that, much quicker. So that's when Elijah and Enoch will start working openly, and the real gospel will flow around the world. Openly, I said work openly, with signs and wonders and miracles and all that stuff, so that people get their attention. Do I think, when I analyze this, I think, yeah, a lot of people in the church are gonna get it. And what are they going to do? They're going to repent, ask forgiveness for these doctrines they followed, and God will give them forgiveness, and they'll start walking right. I think this will happen. I keep going back and forth. I don't know how many, but, it's still consistent with broad and wide is the road to destruction, and many find it. Straight and narrow is the correct path, and few find it. So it's not going to be a massive amount, I don't believe. Maybe I'm wrong, because we're getting into redemption, and it could be that there's going to be a lot. Okay? The people in the church world are going to be, a tremendous amount are going to be adamantly opposed to the two witnesses and think they're evil, perhaps even think they're the beast and the false prophet, and they're going to reject them, and then they're not going to go for it, because they're not supposed to go for it. Okay? Many are called, but few are chosen. Okay? So they hear the call, and what do? They go to the churches. Doesn't matter which of these churches they go to. What if they're Catholic? What if they're Pentecostal or evangelical? They're both so full of error. It doesn't matter. They're all lost. Church of the Antichrist. They teach against Christ. They don't teach so many things that I've covered for years. It's all false teaching based. With the false teaching, there's gonna have some truth, but the truth isn't what you think. They have another Jesus, and they're praising and celebrating and talking about the sun god Tammuz, who they worship on Sunday, not Yeshua HaMashiach, the Son of God. They change the Sabbath, they break 10 Commandments, they break this, they break that, they rewrite the gospel, all this stuff. It's nonsense. But the people go there because they don't have the Holy Spirit. They're not really saved. And what does Matthew 13 say? They're the children of the devil. The devil's their father, because they take on his ways. So will Elijah be preaching or training the Levites before the appearing of the sign of the Son of Man in the clouds? I believe so. Will the temple come down before the glory of God goes in it? Yes. Because you see him going into the temple already there in Ezekiel 43. And this temple comes down from heaven. It says in Ezekiel 37, God puts it here or places it here. This is the house not made with human hands. And it'll look like it came down from heaven. Now, the altar we build, he tells us how to build the altar in Ezekiel 43. It's a brazen altar. It's not that big a deal. Okay? But we're never told how to build the temple, what all the materials are, like he told us how to do the tabernacle. We never get that. He builds it. And that's not taught by them. They've got a bunch of rabbis building the temple. And why would the people know that, like it says in Ezekiel 37? Well, I'll read it to you. Let me look at the live stream. When I read it to you, you'll know for sure that it comes down from heaven. It's not going to be a mystery to you. Who is right, India or Pakistan? Gosh, I don't know. Pakistan is basically a previously sleeping Muslim majority lunatic land. Now they're waking up and becoming active lunatics again. And Modi wants to make India Hindu, where they worship this woman with 8 arms, the statue, this one, that's what he's into. So they're both, both two idiots, two idiots having a fight. I don't think any of them is really worse than the other, but I don't know. I wouldn't pay much attention to it. One's Hindu and the other leader's Muslim. So false god versus false god. A house divided unto itself shall not stand. Yeah? Okay. Ezekiel 37, the last 3 verses, whatever those verse numbers are. 26 to 28. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant. Thus you have everlasting life. Everlasting covenant with them, speaking of Israel, and I will. Now, if you're a believer in Yeshua, you're in Israel, and all Israel shall be saved. And I will place them. That means put them in Israel. That means we come back. But the 10 tribes haven't come back, and only a portion of Judah and Levi have come back. And multiply them, and will set or place. It's the same word that they used for place 6 or 7 words earlier. It's Natan. Strong's number 5414. So you could say set, let's say place, which is the way they interpreted the same word 6 to 7 words previously. You see how they try to deceive you? And will place my sanctuary, and the sanctuary word is the mikdash, the temple, in the midst of them forevermore. The midst is Jerusalem, the middle. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Yea, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And the heathen shall know that it says, Ani Yehovah, I Yehovah. I'm not Yehovah, I'm reading the text. Do sanctify Israel. Now, the word for sanctify is rather deceitful. It's kadosh, kadosh. Now, where do you know that word comes? The holiest of holies in the previous temple was called kadosh kadashim, holy holies, holiest of holies. So it says, correctly translated, into English would say, Yehovah do kadosh, make holy Israel, when my mikdash, my temple, shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Now, why would the heathen know that God made Israel holy if a bunch of rabbis built the temple? Do you think they would buy into something stupid like that? Of course not. But if this temple came down from heaven, which means the mountain, Mount Zion, comes up, which is not there now. It got taken down by soldiers many centuries ago. It comes up also and it lands on that mountain. Well, They know Israel didn't get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and build the mountain before the sun came up. Okay, that's probably going to do away with the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, by the way. Maybe not, but probably will. And that comes up, and the temple there, the next temple. Now, I would assume it's going to look like he came down from heaven, wouldn't you? And that's why the people are going to assume that. But you see how they twist this? They don't want you to know it. They don't want you to know it. They don't want you gravitating to Israel. They want you gravitating to the church, which is the Antichrist church. And that's what they're trying to do. That's it. Now, many people are not going to believe this. But that's what it is. Is the rabbis' synagogues any good? Gosh, no, they're horrible. Are the Messianic congregations any good? No, they're the Messianic synagogues of Satan. That's all they are. No. They've got the divisions, the denominations. They call them umbrella organizations like Union and Messianic congregations. Different doctrinal statements, the variants in Galatians 5:19-21. And the seditions, the divisions like denominations in Galatians 5:19-21, which says if you do such things, you won't enter the kingdom of God. They're just as wicked as the churches. They're antichrist messianic congregations. That's all they are. They're all no good. Okay. But the people go there, the ones that hear the calling, but are not the elect. They're not the remnant. They just hear the calling and they go. And they don't get it right. No. And they don't care either. Because they don't have the Holy Spirit. It says in 2 Corinthians 11:4, you have another Jesus, you have another gospel, and you receive another spirit. They have another spirit. And that other spirit is an unclean spirit, and it's very happy to make them feel peaceful while they accept false doctrines, where the Holy Spirit wouldn't put up with it. Now, there are things that are sinful. Well, let me put it this way. Is it incumbent upon us to perform Bible prophecy? In most ways, no. Is it up to us to increase volcanoes and earthquakes and storms in these latter days and start wars and rumors of wars? No, we're not supposed to do that. I'll be right back. Got myself my tomato juice. So are we supposed to watch while prophecy unfolds, while at the same time we keep ourselves in the doctrines of the Bible, the real doctrines, Yes, but we don't make prophecy happen. So when they mess up prophecy by twisting translations, leaving things out, leaving entire books out, like it says in the Apocalypse of Peter and the Apocalypse of Elijah, that Enoch and Elijah are going to come down from heaven. And that's your two witnesses. When you read that with Zechariah 4, especially the last verse, it's rather obvious. But the church world doesn't read Zechariah 4 very often. Some people have found it and they quote it, but it's not very profound. I mean, try finding people that talk about Zechariah 4 with anything resembling reality as to what it means, and it's rather limited. I mean, they don't get it right. They don't even get it close to right. They get it all botched up, if they even, So, and then there's translation errors associated like that. Like they teach that it says in the last verse, these are, well, I'll read it to you, and then I'll tell you what the Hebrew says. Zechariah 4:14. Then said he, these are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord. That word is, I believe, Adonai, of the whole land or the whole earth. That's Jehovah. But it doesn't say, it says, Shtaim B'nai Yitzar. Okay? So the word two is Shtaim, they got that right. And the anointed ones, they get that from the word Yitzar, means clarified oil. In other words, the clean or pure olive oil, which is, it's representing the anointing. That was the anointing oil. So it means anointed. So they picked that up, but they left out B'nai. That means sons. Enoch and Elijah were the sons of God, which is more than just Yeshua. God says Yeshua is his firstborn son. So why would he call his only son firstborn? He would say, that's my only son. But he does say he's my only begotten son. And that means he's the only son begotten by the Holy Spirit and a woman. Yeah, good luck trying to hear the church preach that if they even know it. Now, to back up this, you just go to Job 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons, and that word is, they say it's Ben. Let me go into the original Hebrew and tell you what the actual word appears here. It says the day. says comes or goes. B'nai. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the word for sons. But it appears in the Hebrew as B'nai, which could be, Ben would be the singular. So it would be, a lot of people have a name in Israel like Ben Abraham, son of Abraham. You know. They use the word Ben, not B'nai. B'nai would be more than one. So let me get back into King James. Now there was a day, we really say the day, but anyway, when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Jehovah, and Satan came also among them. Among. That's in the plural. Okay? Why was Moses also a son of God? Because when he appeared in the Mount of Transfiguration, he was glorified like Elijah. And we know Elijah went up to heaven, so he came down from heaven. And Yeshua told us, you don't go up to heaven unless you come down from heaven. Where Yeshua had not rose from the dead yet. And when he died and he went down for 3 days, he went to Abraham's bosom and led captivity captive. He took these people that were in Abraham's bosom up to heaven. That's what I believe it was. That's what I believe it was. Okay? So, they leave little things out, like sons, to throw you off. Because Satan doesn't want you to know about it. Now, they also leave things in the Bible that are sins without taking those things out. Why? Because there would be no guilt to the people for doing these sinful behaviors if they didn't read in their Bible that you weren't supposed to do these things. So they leave it in the Bible that you're not supposed to do these things, and the people break it, and they comfort the people and give them reasons why it's okay to ignore these things, like the law. Like different doctrinal statements in Acts 2, the early church, which was Messianic congregations in Israel. What were they? They were all one in the apostles' doctrine. They were all following the same doctrine, the apostles' doctrine. That's not the case today. A house divided unto itself shall not stand. The church is going to fall apart. They don't understand what's happening now. Church people, why? No, they got their television, they got their internet, they got their social media. They go to Disney World and places like that. They go to the mall, they eat out. They have barbecues, they have their friends and relatives over, people have babies, people get married. They take trips, they're having a good time, they're distracting. It's closing in on them, but they're still able to have fun. Yeah, crime is up for most people, but they still can have fun. It's not that bad. You don't go to the mall and a bunch of terrorists run in and kill 87 people in America in one day. That's not happening. Their cars get broken into, houses get burgled, sometimes people get mugged. There's rapes, there's a lot of things. But the government makes sure they give them a false hope. And the churches give them a false hope that they're going to be raptured, out of the trouble. Either before the trouble, the middle of the trouble, or right after the trouble. Most of them believe before or in the middle. And they're going to go up to heaven and become gods and then come down with Yeshua and reign over Israel. It's all poppycock fantasy comic books. It's the church of the Antichrist. And they keep them in the game. But when the bad things start happening, much worse than what we have today, then they're going to fall apart. I wouldn't be surprised if you see people beat the pastors up or demand all their money back and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if it'll happen, but they're going to hate the pastors, and there's going to be division. Some of the people are going to keep clinging to the church, and others are going to run away from it. And the ones who run away are going to ask the Lord for help. They're going to start praying. They're going to try to figure out what's really going on, because the church was lying to us. Now, Satan will keep manipulating more and more lies to them to keep them in the church game. But a lot of them are going to give up. Now, I don't know how much time. When the bad stuff happens, there's not going to be a lot of time until it's going to be over for them. Okay? So that's another issue that one has to take into account, right? Now, will India and Pakistan start a big, massive World War III? Listen, guys, it's really, really likely, but I can't guarantee it. Okay, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on at the same time. Iran's going to get it, Edom's going to get it, okay, which is Yemen. Jordan gets it, but maybe they get it after redemption, maybe they get it before, I don't know. It's a little hard for me to get the timing on that, but we're in the siege of Zechariah 12 now. We're being sieged by Lebanon, by Gaza. Egypt has 100,000 plus troops on our border and below Gaza, so they're sieging. Saudi Arabia is going to get in the siege. Edom or Yemen's in the siege. Syria was in the siege and we busted them up. Like with Gaza, we busted them up, but they were in the siege. Iraq was in the siege, but they stopped. They're not busted up yet. And then Iran is in the siege. And Turkey is, in a way, in the siege. They put their military inside central Syria, stuff like that. Okay, so the siege is going to probably enhance and get worse. Okay. Now, when you read Zechariah 12:6, what you're reading about is the two witnesses burning up the enemies round about on the right hand and the left. A siege is not actually a blockade, but it has the purpose of being a blockade. A siege, you got to understand the meaning. Go back to the days of the Roman Empire. What would they do when they lay siege to a place? They'd surround it. Okay, and they would attack it with arrows and catapults and all this other stuff, not invade it. And of course, that stops people and goods from going out or coming in. By definition, it would, right? Okay. So we got that going on. And Yemen is even attacking ships coming to and from Israel, you know. Okay? So, but before we see, you have to read Zechariah 12 with Malachi 3 and 4. It appears before that we see Elijah working with the Levites in Jerusalem so that their offerings become acceptable unto the Lord. So the $1,000,000 question is the offerings. Is that done without a tabernacle and without a temple, just an altar? I seriously doubt it. Would offerings be valid if they were done with an altar by the Levites and the Kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, without a temple or a tabernacle? I believe they would, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. So it says in Ezekiel 37, we'll also have the tabernacle. In 2 Maccabees chapter 2, it tells us that Jeremiah the prophet, before the Babylonian captivity finalized, took the actual tabernacle and hid it in Mount Nebo, which is the mountain that Moses saw the promised land but died on and couldn't enter in. So Moses did die, okay? So he's not coming back again because it's elected unto man to die only once. I mean, he could come as one of them because they died. So that's not going to happen, okay? He could come back as a glorified Moses for sure, but that's another deal. Okay, so he hid the tabernacle in a mountain and in a cave and sealed it up so nobody could find where it was. And it has the actual tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the incense altar, and those three things. It doesn't tell us anything about the actual books of the Bible that used to be placed inside the ark. And maybe they're still there and Jeremiah just didn't reference it, or maybe it's not there. The oldest Hebrew manuscript we can get our hands on goes back to 900 AD. Now, the Septuagint goes back to pre-Yeshua coming to earth. But I don't have the ability to translate the Septuagint. It's just an Old Testament. And the English versions of the Septuagint are garbage. It's just junk. Completely twisted pieces of garbage. I never saw a good one. I never really bore down hard to learn Greek. I toyed with it briefly and gave up. I much prefer to work in the Hebrew, but if you had the skill for the Greek, you could get a Septuagint that is in Greek and not twisted and try to understand it. Okay? There's supposedly a good version of the New Testament by a guy called Sweet, Swete. It's in Greek. Nobody ever put it into English. The reason nobody ever put it into English is probably because it's good, but I can't do Greek. We could all pray the Lord gives me the ability to understand and translate Greek, but it would have to be supernatural, like boom, all of a sudden it's there. I'm too old and too busy with what I do with the broadcasts to sit there and spend 2 or 3 hours a day practicing Greek and trying to learn Greek. It would probably take 2 years. I did many, many years ago get some correspondence courses and start working on the Greek, but I never got anywhere with it. I knew the alphabet and I knew how to, but I couldn't get it. I didn't know it good enough to see where they were tricking us. I could do that with the Hebrew in a lot of cases. Maybe there's some things they twist that I miss, but a lot of times I could catch them. But I'm light years away from being able to do that with the Greek. And that wasn't the original language anyway. It was always Hebrew. The New Testament was Hebrew. What they did is they took the New Testament in Greek and they compared it with the Septuagint. And this is what they did. It was very clever. They looked at the word in Greek, and the Septuagint is a Greek New Testament, Old Testament, a Greek Old Testament. So they found the word in the New Testament in the Septuagint, and then they looked to see what Hebrew word it replaced. And then they took that Hebrew word and plugged it into the New Testament and restored it that way, which was probably rather good. And remember, the actual Septuagint was written before Yeshua came to earth by quite a number of years, too. So it was written before he was born and everything. So it's probably not doctored up because they had nobody, they didn't have anything to hide, really, back then. Okay? Like they do after Yeshua. So it was probably a good work, but you know, what does it say in the Bible? There's so many books, you could spend your whole life reading books, you know. I wish I had the Greek skill. When I was a new believer, I used to have fantasies of running around carrying original Greek New Testament and an original Hebrew Old Testament. That's, you know, as a brand new believer, I was thinking that way, you know. It's put a little Tabasco in my tomato juice. So I wish I had the skill to dissect the Greek. Now, if you get e-sword.net, there's 2 Hebrew New Testaments in there. One's rather junky and one's rather good. The one that's good is written by a guy named Salkinson. That's the one that's good. There's other... Ooh, the Tabasco hit. There's other more modernly written Hebrew New Testaments that are just garbage, you know. Salkinson's goes back to the 1800s. Again, this was a tool when it was written. How many believers had access to this language, Hebrew, that would understand it? It was a scholarly, you know, a scholar's work, and it was prepared for the seminary. You know, the seminary people, they were seminary educated pastors. They could read it if they studied Hebrew, but they never really knew the meaning of Hebrew anyway. Seminary Hebrew is junk. I tried studying it once. It's nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about. So then, you know, but what they've never done is nobody ever put Strong's numbers. Strong's isn't always perfect, but he's the best of them. There's another guy, I forget the guy's name. He could predate Strong's by a long time. Jusinius. He did he did like what Strong's did for the Hebrew. He did it for the Hebrew, not the Greek, I believe, just the Hebrew. And he put it into English, and it's not bad at all. But you can't get the numbering system like Strong's. When that was originally written, which I think was in the 1800s, it was written as a tool mostly for the wealthier people that had an education that could afford it, the church seminaries and stuff like that. How many true believers back then were there, and how many true believers were there that would have enough of an education to understand and master this. So if all you had was your King James Bible, you would know what the sins were because Satan made sure those were in there. And if you chose to believe those and you'd be probably kicked out of the church, or you'd leave on your own, really, and you would still be confused about prophecy. But again, prophecy is not something that we do. If you start teaching prophecy incorrectly, that's error. If you do teach it incorrectly and you don't know you're teaching it incorrectly, you think it's the truth, how much error is that? You're still teaching error, but you're doing it not out of a black heart. You're doing it because you don't know any better. There's a difference. Okay? So it's rather difficult to master true Bible prophecy unless you could delve into the Hebrew. And few people can do that or will do that. I don't go through the Hebrew New Testament and try teaching out of that very much for the following reason. First of all, it's very hard, very laborious. There's no Strong's numbers. Next, the way to really do it is you have to verify what they did, like go back to the Septuagint in Greek and find that word, which is murder to do without the Strong's numbers, see? And then find that word and then actually check where in the Septuagint that word appears in the Greek, and then look at it in the Hebrew. So you need to have a pretty good grasp of Greek and Hebrew to do it, and I have no grasp of Greek. So for me to do one verse in the Bible could be an hour and a half or 2 hours or more, I got so much time in a day before I burn out, But it would be rather laborious to try that. They do have a couple of books that accelerate it a little bit. My wife has them. They're in the house. But they don't have the numbering system where you can go really fast, and it doesn't do it. So I like to teach a lot out of the Old Testament, like the apostles did and Yeshua did. None of them taught out of the New Testament. But of course, I do use the New Testament quite a bit also. Okay. So it's very difficult right now to really get a good handle on the true gospel. There's books missing from the Bible that the Bible names. And just because, let's say it says Jasher or something, right? And you find some jackass from some seminary wrote a book called, the original book of Jasher. That doesn't mean it's the real book of Jasher, okay? It means some jerk's playing with you, okay? You don't want to take advantage of that. You don't want them taking advantage of you. You understand these things? Okay. So one has to be very careful what book is it, There's a lot more than one book of Enoch. They got books of Enoch. Now, R.H. Charles does it when you get his big book. It's a big, thick, huge book. Like I said, I was unable to find the pseudepigrapha, the whole thing with all these extra biblical books, as a download in Kindle with Amazon. I'll have to look again. I'm pretty sure it's there. I tried searching by the author, and they have a lot of the books in his pseudepigrapha and his apocrypha. He also had two books. One was the apocrypha, one was pseudepigrapha. And they pop up. I think apocrypha is Old Testament oriented, and the pseudepigrapha is New Testament oriented. And they do pop up, and you could download them. I bought one for $1.20 yesterday, an Enoch from him, because it's easier for me to use it in the Kindle than to pick up the book. My eyes aren't so great. I do better with the Kindle. I can manipulate the size of the print. And then they had another version for $2 that said large print. And I paid for that and downloaded it. I figured I'd splurge for $2 and change. And the print size is the same as the regular one. So and I'm going to go look for other texts there that I could download. And, some are 50 cents. Some they have for free, 0. They don't even charge you to download it. But I mean, there's no big event giving them 50 cents or even $1.50 if you want the book. It's not a big deal. You can buy a Kindle device, which I have, but I don't use, or just download Kindle into your computer. And that's what I do. And it works quite well, I haven't had I don't remember the last time I ever turned on the Kindle device. It was a long time ago. I don't see any great advantage of it. Amazon doesn't give a hoot if you use their Kindle device or you use your own computer. They just want to sell stuff to you, So I'm going to dig around in there. So you might be able to find the books by R.H. Charles. So R.H. Charles, when he does Enoch, he has the Ethiopian, and he shows you the difference in the translations, and he does a pretty scholarly work. And back in 1917, I don't think there were that many people in America that were interested in Jehovah and Yeshua that had an education where they could assimilate this material. I really don't think there were very many people. These were people that went to Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge, that had the money to go there and the social position to be accepted. And they also went to seminaries, and they wound up in the church world somehow. Churchianity of the Antichrist, not the real, So they were really preaching to them, Maybe way back then, when there was no Israel, there was no Balfour Declaration, which was a definite warning of an Israel coming, which was 1917, I think. Yeah, same year. How about that? I think Satan's churches were a lot looser about revealing things. Books written in the 16 and 1700s about the North American Indians, where they had ministry people go and live amongst them for months in America and describe many things to make them think that these were the lost tribes. They had Hebrew words in their vocabulary, Hebrew Bible, Old Testament traditions, lots of things. And at the same time, they were worshiping sticks and stones and demons and stuff, right? And they were publishing works explaining why they thought they were the lost tribes. And I read some of these works. They were amazing things. But who was reading this stuff in 1700s? People weren't getting educated, okay? Some kids went to school and they got to the point where they could read and write and do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division to some extent, and that was it. Their education was over. They worked on the farm or in the business. Okay. So yeah, they could read, but what complexity of material could they assimilate in their reading? You know, a Dick and Jane book or something like that, See Spot Run, stuff like that. They weren't going to read sophisticated language, like talking about the different tenses of foreign languages. This stuff would be way over their head. But the Satan bots that had money, that were in the church world, that were being supported, and they were scholarly oriented, they had a good enough education to go through that. Back then they didn't have much information about physics and chemistry to really study it deeply. Medicine was very simplistic. Back then in the 1700s or 1600s, I highly doubt a doctor went to college for 4 years, medical school for 4 years, and then interned for a year. I don't think it was anything like that. They probably went to college for 2-3 years or something. There wasn't that much, medicine being practiced. They, did do emergency surgeries like amputated limbs, and they would pull bullets out and sew people up and, stuff like that, but they were not real sophisticated. They didn't have medicines. They were using herbs, basically. It was a simple thing to go to medical school or dental school. It wasn't a big, long, drawn-out thing. What in the world was there to learn? They didn't even have regular anesthesia. They were using other things, Well, they used morphine and opium as, if they were doing something that wasn't deep, but they didn't do a lot of deep surgery either, I don't know what they were doing. If you gave somebody enough morphine or opium, could you amputate a limb and they'd sleep through it? I have no idea. Probably not. But it was a pretty barbaric system. It still is, but it's been, flavored, and people think it's a great idea. You have surgery. Oh, you don't need your gallbladder, we'll take it out. You don't need your spleen, we'll take it out. We'll take your adenoids out. We'll take this out. We'll take that out. You don't need 2 kidneys. Take one out and give it to this person. They need it to live. It's kind of nonsense, Why did God put things in there if they didn't serve a purpose, like the appendix? And, no point in it, Not much point in it. It's just more lies of the devil, Why do you need God for healing when you got the medical system, It's not God didn't set up the medical system. Herbs are for healing, not the doctors, but go tell them that. So it really is an uphill battle. I remember when I was learning spiritual warfare in the 90s, I was by myself in Israel, and I was on unemployment insurance, and I was praying in the spirit all day and in the natural and reading the word. And I was begging the Lord to send somebody to teach me spiritual warfare, and he never did. That probably what I didn't know it at that time. And then by reading the scriptures and a lot of prayer in the natural and in the spirit, and I would try it and do things. And then if I got hit a snag, I'd ask him why, and he'd show me. And I couldn't believe I was going to get through it and actually know spiritual warfare. It took a few months, and then I did. Just took time. And I got it all out of the King James Bible, basically. So I got there, but I was begging the Lord to send me somebody. Send me an angel, and he never did. I had to pull it out of the scriptures, but he got me there. And then I, started practicing, making mistakes, and then eventually I figured out how to not make mistakes. Let me take a look at the live stream, see if we got questions. Donnie Brasco, okay. That was a movie, I think, or what was the name of that guy? I don't know. It's Al Pacino, I think, about a mob guy undercover or something. Okay, well, I guess that's what let me take a look at my notes. Maybe there's something I forgot. Hold on. A lot of these people in the churches, they think they know how the Lord works. And they're all hung up on mercy and grace because that's what the Antichrist churches are teaching them. And they don't understand that Yeshua said, I'm coming back for a church without spot, wrinkle, and blemish. And they're full of those things. They don't understand what he did to Israel when they disobeyed the scriptures. Repeatedly, warning after warning, how bad it was for Israel. They were eating their own children in 70 AD era. They wound up in Egypt as slaves for hundreds of years. They wound up in Babylon for 70 years. And then they were out of Israel for close to 2,000 years. Except for a tiny, tiny amount of people. Tiny, tiny. And look what happened with Noah's flood. 8 people made it out. What were there, millions of people back then? Probably. 8 made it. 8. What does Jehovah say? I change not. They don't get it. Because they're deceived by the unclean spirits. They don't get it. They don't know that Satan wants them destroyed. He wants them in the lake of fire. That's the only way he can get even, so to speak, with Jehovah, is to turn people away from him and make people enemies of Jehovah. That's all he can do. And God knows that. And people they don't get it. I change not. Look at Noah's flood. And then you read Jeremiah 30:11, where he says he's going to destroy all the nations he scattered the Israelites into, and they don't think he'll do it, apparently. It's also found in Jeremiah 46, verse 28. And that's going to happen. And could India and Pakistan start this fall of the dominoes? Yeah. China's in on this, believe me. That means you got 3 billion people in this thing, not Ukraine and Russia. 3 billion people. The Bible also tells us first to the Jews, then the Goyim, then the heathens. The good things and the bad things. That's what it says in the Bible. Learn. Israel's been at war on multiple fronts since October 7th, 2023. It's coming to a close. Lebanon ain't fighting with us anymore, neither is Gaza. They don't have what to fight with. Neither is Syria, neither is Iraq. Iran is just threatening, not fighting, and Yemen is fighting. First to the Jews, then to the nations, the heathen. So the wars are coming to the nations, believe me. And now you look at India and Pakistan, you look at Ukraine and Russia, North and South Korea, China and Taiwan, sprinkle Japan in there, and you're getting it. America and Iran, and got it? They don't. These people in the Antichrist churches don't know how Jehovah works. They don't want to believe it. Everything is, all the sins are forgiven, everything's okay, and yeah. All you got to do is know who the Messiah is and believe that, and you're saved. And that's nonsense. Faith without works is dead. Where are their works? They have works, but not good works. Okay, well, I guess that's what I got for today. I'm Moshe. Please pray for me and my wife. Pray for our peace, safety, protection, joy. Pray for healing of our bodies that we keep recovering. And pray for strength, stamina, endurance for us. Pray for our finances. Pray for better videos, more revelations about prophecy, better videos. Pray for our animals and pets, which are all rescues. And if you guys need help about trying to search some of these old books out, I've read quite a lot of them in the past, but probably going back 30 years. But I've read quite a few of them multiple times. And I always use R period, H period, Charles, his set of apocryphal books and his set of pseudepigrapha books. Now these books appear individually as well. And those were the two that I found were the best to work with. Okay. Some of the books in there I think were nonsense, and some of them I think were pretty good. Jubilees is a good book. It's not heavy on revealing prophecy, though, but it's a good book. All right. And My email address is in the description box under the video on the lowest line down. IsraelGiving with the number 7 at gmail.com. And offering information is also towards the bottom of the description box. And that's what I got. So I hope today helped you with something. And I'm going to keep updating what's going on with the wars and stuff like that. Mostly on Telegram. When stuff gets weird, I'll do another live stream. And like I said a few days ago, it may get to a point where there's going to have to be 2 live streams a day because so much is going to happen. And I'm also going to start trying to make these live streams about 2 hours, roughly an hour and a half or 2 hours earlier than I have been. So when you're talking, let's say I get it out at 6 o'clock my time, it's 10 o'clock in the evening in New York, and it would be 9 o'clock Midwest, and what would be 7 o'clock in California. So I'd be able to reach people more, and they'll be able to participate in the live stream, and that might help win more people over. So I'm going to try to be doing that. As I told you earlier, that's what I was searching for, why I'm starting to wake up earlier in the morning all the time. I don't know. And I'm rested, I'm talking like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I used to get up at 5, and I was happy with that. But 4 o'clock, but I'd go to bed early. I'd fall asleep, so I would have enough hours of sleep. I usually need 6. And then I don't understand what, and I was asking him, and then he was showing me, well, if you, instead of futzing around between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, take care of what you need to take care of to do your live stream, do your research and the news and everything, and then get on earlier. And you reach more people. So that kind of explains what was going on. So I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And I'm out. Thanks.